School Board this Monday evening, February 15th, 2016. Would you rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was about to make an announcement that I no longer have to make. No worries. Item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the February 1st, 2016 minutes and February 8th, 2016 minutes. Is there a motion on the February 1st minutes? Made to accept by Vice Chair Barnes. Is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. Any corrections? Mr. Marcus.
There was one on page 7, which Mr. Schneider, correct me if I'm wrong, line 338 should read, he does not see their lack of market penetration.
That is correct. I had marked the same thing. So his change is correct. Should be a not.
Excellent.
And then something small on page 15, line 719, there should not be an apostrophe in students.
Great. Any other corrections? Mr. Schneider.
Well, Mr. Marcus has caught the first one, which is good. Next one I have is on page 11. On line number 522, it says Business Administrator Chevenel stated that this budget is $1,615,000. It would be like maybe clear to say like 1.65 or whatever the amount is.
Yeah, I think it was more accurate to say 1,615,000.
Right, or 1.615, because you've got 1,615 space 1,000. So technically it's correct, but it's harder to understand. So 1.65 million.
We got it.
That's good. Next one I have is on page 12, line 566. Board Member Schneider shared this is only the second time in his 4 years on the board. Not quite 10, but
might feel like that.
Some days, yeah. And then finally on page 16, there's several here that are, I don't know how to, I'll go through them. If you look on line 766, we're talking about the review that I had with the Planning and Building Committee. It said, shared planning board's recommendations for the capital improvement project in the school's board's response, and discussed we should take the word potential because the joint meeting with this, the town council. So it said discussed a joint meeting with the town council. It should be on line 766. A little further down on line 769, during the meeting, debate ensued as to whether the O'Gara Drive land where the proposed, this is what's weird, because what I talked about was the land closer to the high school where the SAU sped building is proposed, and then the land where the current tennis courts and skate park is.
So rather than is now located, is now proposed?
Right. So whether the O'Gara Drive land where the existing services is located is a larger parcel. Okay. So the problem is the land where it's proposed. So you're right. And it's not even, I guess it's on O'Gara Drive. It's next to the parking lot. So it said whether the O'Gara Drive land where the proposed special services offices, it should say is proposed. You get the word twice in there. So if you just fix up the flow to say where it's going to be proposed or whether the land where the skate park is currently located. And then what the next one says, if you say that the proposed Special Services Office land measures 1 acre, then it'll be clear. Trouble is both are on O'Gara Drive. So it's confusing when you say that. So if we could say one is the proposed SAU sped office and the other is the skate park, then things fall into place more cleanly. And that's all I had.
Okay. Any other corrections? Vice Chair Barnes.
On to page 11, lines 535 through 537. And it just kind of like threw together all my comments into one sentence and kind of mingled them. So I'm just going to kind of read through what it should say. It says, Vice Chair Barnes noted that the approximately $500,000 that the board cut in its last meeting added, meaning brought us closer to the default budget, period. And then the reason we are not below default is a result of the budgeted capital projects totaling about $2 million. If this amount was deducted from the then proposed budget, we would be well under the default amount. I think that's what I said. That's what it should read. And then just a point of clarification, because we had, I forgot to write it down on my cover page, so forgive me. When we were discussing the roof, I asked two questions, and one was, what's the difference of the cost between the whole roof and the partial? And it was around $200,000, and it was put as $487,000, which was what would the cost be next year? So the two questions were, what was the difference? And that shouldn't have been the $487,000; it should have been, it was $200 and something thousand. And if we could just check with Matt to get the correct amount. And then the second question was, if we did it next year, what would the cost be? And it was in the 400s. It was just 487. So that's where the difference was in that language.
Okay.
And I cannot find the page number on my cheat sheet. So I will email it to Marge to get to you tomorrow.
Is that enough to go on, Rose? Is that enough info to go on? Yes.
Great. And that's what I had.
Great. Any other corrections? I have just a few minor ones. On page 5, at the end of line 206, if we can replace the word he with the completion rate per household. Similarly, on line 210 on the same page, it's the completion rate per household that could not be completed, as opposed to an overall completion rate. Back on page 7, line 338, if we could replace the word Merrimack with the Merrimack School District to be more specific. Page 13, line 636, he would prefer more data before making a decision as opposed to and. And I believe that is all that I had. So with that, we will put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the February 1st, 2016 minutes as amended, say aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0, and the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Thank you, sir. And now I'll entertain a motion to accept the February 8th, 2016 minutes. Made by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded by Ms. Guagliumi. Any corrections? Okay. Seeing none, we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the February 8th, 2016 minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. And the student rep's opinion.
I'll abstain.
Good choice. All right. That takes us now to item number 3, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone looking to address the board under public participation? Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. Okay. My name is Bailey Carrillo. I am a sophomore at Merrimack High School, and I run on the cross-country, indoor track, and outdoor track teams along with my teammates Grace Corbett and Megan Glisson. I'm here on behalf of my mom, Kristen, who is the president of the Merrimack Roadrunners, the booster club for running sports at Merrimack High School and Merrimack Middle School. My mom's a nurse and is working tonight, so I volunteered to read her letter on behalf of our booster club. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Kristen Carrillo. I serve as president of the Merrimack Roadrunners Booster Club, a volunteer organization which supports all of our high school and middle school running programs, outdoor track, indoor track, and cross-country in Merrimack. At our Booster Club meeting on Wednesday, January 20th, 2016, we voted unanimously to support the budget proposal to replace the high school track. Our support is driven by many factors. Merrimack is one of very few Division I schools that has a track that is in such deplorable condition. If not replaced, the school is unsure whether the track will be usable by the high school and middle school track teams for the upcoming season. In its present condition, the track could pose a risk to our outdoor track teams and members of the community who use the facility. Last track season, a part of the track actually came up in a runner's spikes. We are told that there are multiple areas of the track that are not glued down, and these areas are not fixable. There are also areas on the track where grass is growing through the lanes. While this is certainly an embarrassment, we believe that it is even more of a liability for the town. If the outdoor track is not replaced, we fear that the middle school and high school track teams would be forced to travel to other tracks for both practices and meets. This busing would take an enormous amount of time from our student-athletes' day and would be a scheduling nightmare for our coaches. It is already difficult enough for our track teams to schedule buses for our existing schedule. Adding daily practices to an already overburdened schedule may doom our program. Additionally, the cost of busing our student-athletes to these neighboring track facilities, assuming that there are any available, may be a cost prohibitive. In addition to our track athletes, the Roadrunners Booster Club, many community organizations, and individual members of our community make use of the high school track. Each spring, for example, our Booster Club sponsors the Merrimack Invitational to raise money for all of our high school and middle school running programs. It is our biggest fundraiser of the track season. The running programs would suffer greatly if we were unable to host this in our other outdoor track meets. Additionally, with the new track, Merrimack would be able to place a bid to hold the 2017 Division I High School Outdoor State Meet. This has the potential to raise money for the school district and all of our running programs. We urge you to keep funding for the high school track replacement in your budget. We believe that is in the best interest of our residents of our town and our teams that continue to honor our town through their commitment and hard work. Thank you for the thoughtful consideration. Kristen Carrillo, President, Merrimack Roadrunners Booster Club. Thank you for your time.
Very well done. Is there anyone else looking to address the board under public participation? Okay, seeing none, we will close public participation and move to item number 4, acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000. Business Administrator Chevenel.
Thank you very much. This evening, we have for your consideration a gift to the school district from the Health Trust in the amount of $1,500. The gift was received by the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee and will be used for worksite health and safety activities to benefit district employees. As an outgrowth of this, 3 designated health and safety coordinators for the district will attend a full-day training session. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Powell.
I move that we accept the gift from Health Trust.
And a second, made by Ms. Guagliumi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0, and the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Thank you, sir. And that will take us to item number 5 on tonight's agenda, Science and Art Interdisciplinary Course at Merrimack High School. I would invite to the table science educator, Dr. Sarah Campbell, and art educator, Ms. Carolyn Rordam. And I will let them introduce their student guests, or our student guests.
warming up.
So my name is Carolyn Rordam. I've been an art educator at Merrimack High School for 10 years. And just to give you a background about the Science of Art class, as an artist, I was always aware that science, technology, and mathematics and engineering played a significant role in my practice. As a teaching artist, my ambition has always been to guide students through creative problem solving and critical thinking that's necessary in the art making. And those ideas were the seed of the Art of Science class. And I also had the knowledge that at one time in man's history, artists and scientists were not separated. They were one and the same. And today in contemporary art, and in science, in their practices, artists and scientists are finding that common ground again. And the enduring understanding that I hope students gain from this class is a comprehension that the creative process and the scientific method are not different. They are one and the same. And
sorry. So I'm Sarah Campbell, and I have been a teacher at Merrimack High School for, I think it's 6 years now, and I teach chemistry. I came here straight from grad school. I got my PhD at Dartmouth, and as part of that science training, I actually lived my life in I like to think of it as a silo of science, where I didn't get out very much. If I went to the physics building, that was an unusual day. And so I'm a chemist. And coming to the high school, I actually, we served doing lunch duty together, Carolyn and I did, and we started talking, and she introduced me to the idea that science and art had this overlap, and I actually started reading about it, and it's absolutely blew my mind how much overlap there was. And as a science teacher, you struggle sometimes getting students who aren't science-oriented interested in the science. And I saw this as a way to, pull in those students who aren't necessarily science-oriented.
and also pulling in the art students who are not necessarily science-oriented. So what we're going to present tonight is basically an overview of our end of the semester project. We're handing out copies of the actual project that the students received. So this was the requirements for the project, what they were expected to do. So the goal of this project was to focus on the process and creation of art through science, or vice versa. And the students chose to perform a more in-depth study of a topic we talked about during the semester, or they had the freedom to choose their own topic. And basically, all projects, they had to submit a project proposal, 3 pieces of art that was display ready, and then a presentation. So we had kind of a gallery day where we set up all of their pieces, and we went to each presenter and was asking them about their project, what their goals were, what their initial purpose was, how they came to the conclusions that they came to, and talking about their process, both their creative process and their scientific process. And they all had a paper that went along with the pieces of art.
And so we actually had a student who was going to come, but she was out sick today. So here are her 3 pieces. We had spent some time when we were doing painting talking about pointillism, which, if you don't know what that is, that's using little dots to create an image because of the way our eye actually sees color and it blends color on its own. We actually have only 3 different color receptors in our eye. We have red, we have green, we have blue. So anytime you see yellow, it could actually be a yellow, or it could be a mixture of 2 different colors that you are seeing to perceive yellow. And that's what the pointillist artists were experimenting with. So Erin actually experimented with both the colors of the dots and the perception, and also the different sizes of dots to see what kind of a visual distance you needed to get from the different pieces in order to be able to see the difference. And her project was really neat because as she was doing her project, she ended up changing her focus a little. She actually started with the image with the more reddish hair with the large dots, and that was going to be her medium-sized piece until she realized it was really hard to make dots that big. And so she decided at that point, that was going to be her mid-sized or her large one, and she did a different mid-sized piece because it was really great to see that thought in the middle of her project, that she was able to see that and recognize that and make that decision as she was doing her project instead of just kind of plowing on with what she had originally planned. She was able to actually use her creative and scientific processes that we had talked about all semester to make that change.
Another interesting thing was her testing process. I thought it was really interesting how she tested people's with glasses, without glasses. And so she had, along with each piece, this person wore glasses, this person didn't wear glasses, and, she personally wore glasses. And so it also became actually this, vision-oriented. And then distance, too. So she had distance in there, plus 20/20 vision versus all the different types of vision. So there was a lot more going on there than painting. So now we're going to introduce our first student presenter, Zoe Goulet, and she's going to talk about her crochet fishtails.
Oh, I don't? Okay. Hi, my name is Zoe Goulet. I'm a senior at Merrimack High School. I chose to focus on crocheting fishtails because of a video we watched in Art of Science where two women crocheted a large coral reef with bright colors and various textures to represent a healthy and lively coral reef. To raise awareness for dying reefs, which lose their vibrant colors and thriving environment, including thousands of species of fish, which inspired me to create these fishtails. Okay. There were no patterns available for me to use, so I had to create one with graph paper. For my first tail, I simply crocheted 22 loops for my first row, and as I went up each row, I subtracted one loop from each side, causing my tail to taper off to a point, creating a triangle. I discovered that the pressure from the rows building up on top of the first row and the lack of structure from the triangle shape caused the first row to collapse and warp downward into an arc shape, which was a pleasant surprise since I was trying to create the arc shape for the fishtails. For my second tail, I used my discovery of the warping structure to plan out my tail accordingly. This tail was slightly more complicated to create more of a sloping design. For the first bottom row, I subtracted one loop every 2 rows, and then for the next few rows, I subtracted one every 1 row, and then for the next few, I did one every 2, and then one every 1, as you can see in the graph design. With an O. Okay. I picked lunate tails for my first tails to crochet because it's incredibly aerodynamic. The lunate shape is called so due to its crescent moon-like arc. It can be found on fish such as the great white shark, tuna, swordfish, or scud. This fin is very helpful because the minimal surface area provides less drag, which means less power and effort required for maneuvering. this is such an aerodynamic design that it is used for things like basic commercial jet wings and surfboards used for steering, like in that one for my first tail, and then for the scup fish tail, that's my second crochet one. One thing I learned through this project is that crocheting takes a very long time. It requires lots of counting and focus, and it's very relaxing to do in my spare time. Out of almost all art mediums I've practiced, this is by far the easiest to work on while mobilized because there's no cleanup. I don't have to keep a paint palette flat. I don't have to try to make sure nothing spills or anything. It's just one long string and a little hook. Also, I find many crocheted pieces to serve a useful purpose more than just looking pretty, such as gloves, hats, scarves, sweaters, or socks. I found the information I learned about the fish and the environment very interesting and important to mine and everyone's lives. We need to raise awareness for the Earth's health in order to restore it and maintain our beautiful coral reefs and trees and mountains and everything, environment. And I wasn't really interested in science class before this year. I've taken 8 art classes and struggled in 3 science classes. And this is by far like my favorite science class. It's really interesting with all the different projects we've done. And it really helped me understand the real world uses for science and how it can impact and benefit everyone's lives. And that's my project.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Powell. Do you mind taking a question, Zoe?
Yes.
These are absolutely gorgeous, but you just made a comment that made me wonder, did you view this as a science class or as an art class?
In the beginning, I definitely viewed it as more of an art class, but by like the first day, I realized this is definitely a really sciencey class, and it's awesome because the way these 2 awesome teachers have been able to integrate science and art and show us how it relates to one another.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Zoe. Thank you.
And can I just say, I've been crocheting since I was in 4th grade, and it's really not at all easy to make your own pattern. I was so impressed with what she was able to do.
Hello, my name is Meryl Rogers, and I'm a senior at Merrimack High School, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank my teachers and the school board for inviting me to speak today. So my project was unique. We made planets, and as we were given the project, my partner and I were thinking, what's a really great way to really take all of the art that we've learned and all of the science that we've learned and kind of showcase them in a beautiful and understandable way. And the way we chose to do that was through planets. We started with styrofoam balls and then covered them with plaster of Paris. As those dried, we kind of wondered, are they going to be able to pick up the dye we were using? And what we decided to use was a water marbling kit. We had just gone through the water marbling unit, and we were both really fascinated with how the colors worked with one another and how it interacted with the different mediums we used. And our hypothesis was, how will temperature affect the colors? So we had 3 different temperatures. We had warm, hot, and cold. We started with warm, expecting it to be okay, and in reality it was okay. The colors sometimes muddled together, sometimes stayed clear, so it wasn't really our favorite way to use the medium. We also used hot, which we expected to work the best because we figured the warmth will kind of allow the colors to expand better and it's going to look better. But in reality, it really muddled the colors together and we couldn't really get the desired look. Our least favorite, we expected to be, was cold, but in reality it was the best because all of the lines came out incredibly crisp and all the colors stayed very separated. We later learned the science of this, which was that the surface tension kept the pigments on the water better and allowed us to have a better outcome. In conclusion of the project part, what we'd do again would be try to see how we could maybe water marble the plaster Paris before and see if maybe we could work something like that in. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow and expand our ideas from what we learned here. It's kind of like every unit we do, we feel we could spend another couple months on because there's just so many avenues that we've learned and so many different ways that we've been able to use them in our lives, which was really interesting and unexpected. Another really great part of the class is understanding how different people's thoughts and different people's ideas can work together, both from the artist side and the science side. I know next year I'm starting at an engineering university, which was very unexpected considering I'm very art-minded, and I was very anxious because I was wondering how am I going to find anything in common with anyone here. But after the first couple weeks of the class, I realized that every part of both sides really has a different counterpart in the other. So, you find a beautiful piece of art and then you discover all the science behind it. You find an interesting, science or chemical reaction and you find the beauty of it. So I think that a lot of the students that are going to leave this class are going to realize in their lives as they grow up and as they move on and as they go into their work that they can interact and better work with other people. So I think that's a really great part of this, especially this interdisciplinary class, because it allows one to kind of see outside of oneself and to kind of notice what other people's strengths and what other people's weaknesses are and how they can better support and help them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meryl.
So for our next presentation, I have the slides, but honestly, on the screen it doesn't work as well, so I have the live pieces to show.
Oh, nice.
I think we'll pass them around as well, or just hold them up. I'm just going to hold them up, so I'll play the Vanna White too. Sita.
Hello, I'm Sita Samsuk. I'm a senior at Merrimack High School. My project was Optical Illusions. I wanted to do Optical Illusion because at the time being we did color palettes and we were just testing color themes. But I was interested of how our eyes were intercepted by the colors and shapes and why do we see different objects of when it was in front of us. Optical Illusions use color and light and pattern to create images that can be deceptive or misleading to our brains. It occurs because our brain is trying to intercept what we see and what makes sense of the world around us. And for my first piece, I kind of played around and looked up what I can do. Sample. Look at my lovely teacher. So what do you see?
It looks like it's three-dimensional.
Do you think it's slanting? Do you see slanted lines?
Slanting and curving.
They're actually
some
straight
curving.
lines,
Yeah.
though. Yeah. They're straight lines. They're straight lines, yes. If you look closely, they're straight lines.
I believe her, I do. Neat.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh no. All of it's straight.
So now, see, you have to give away the secret. How
secret?
is it appears that way to us?
Well, my material medium is paper art, and it's all actually of measurement, so they're all at least an inch apart, and they had to be very accurate. I had to cut it piece by piece so they can have that clean cut, And I was like, when I was working it close up, I was like, this is not going to work. This doesn't look like it's curved. But then I stepped away on the final day, and I was like, wow, it's working. Oh, didn't see that happening. But the secret was my measurements being accurate as possible. And I think that would be for my next piece. This one. There we go. But I want to start with this piece.
Oh, you want to start with that piece? Sorry.
So I started with the spinning circles. This is what it's called, the pattern. I started with colored pencil and paper art. At first, I did it on white paper, and I was coloring. I saw how, well, this was my first attempt. I saw how there were different colors, and it depends how many colors you use for how many circles you built in. And I thought the more colors, the more circles, the more your mind will be blown away, and the more you see. But then I messed up because I didn't realize how you had to be accurate on how big each shape should be and how big each, like, the spacing should be. And that's when I realized I should try a different perspective. For my second one, I took more time on this one with my colors and coloring. I did marker instead because it had a better contrast, and I realized the colors looked so much better. It just pops out more. But again, I had time consuming. It was getting the last minute. I didn't have that much materials. I had to pick the colors that looked the best together, and this is what happens.
So is it that the colors are going in opposite directions as you go deeper into the circle that gives you the impression of depth, or is it just the colors?
Yeah, they're all going the opposite directions. I think that gives more of the loose effect. But I still think this is another failing attempt because I have a better version, but I didn't have enough time.
You're very hard on yourself.
I always think there's something to be better.
Well, at some point they look like circles, and at some point they look like it's a swirl going down.
Right.
And I can't make up my mind which it is, so you've done an excellent job, I would say.
Yeah, and they almost.
But then again,
they
it's
look
not too
connected.
hard to fool me, so it's not saying much.
Okay, so I'm not the only one.
Did a great job, Sia.
Thank you.
You could probably hypnotize us all.
I think you guys are itching to hold that.
Oh, yeah. It was late at night, and I was like, I don't know if it's my mind that's getting me or it's working. So I was like, I hope that it's just working. And it did.
It did.
Yay.
Great job.
But for my conclusion, I think Optimal Illusion is a great piece to work with, and the class is great because I am not a science kid.
You are now.
Oh, yes. It changes process because of Dr. Campbell and Wardham. I kind of took the course because Wardham talked about it, and I didn't think I could take it because I'm not a CP level course student. I'm more of a standard, so I thought it would be too hard for me to take. But they worked with me so I could learn more, and it did teach me a lot. And I didn't expect to learn so much about science and art. And all the videos they showed and like the information, I am so mind blown.
You should be very proud. Hopefully you don't doubt yourself again in the future.
Not as much.
There you go.
As much.
Last but not least, Miss Kim Ortega.
All right. Hi, so I'm Kimberly Ortega. I'm a junior at Merrimack High School. And for my project, when presented with the project, I had no idea what to choose. I was waffling between different ideas because all the projects that we had done throughout the year could be expanded on. Every project that we had done, we could open up another door and go down a different avenue. I personally was fascinated when we did a unit on pigment and color, and we learned about how different pigments that go into oil paints are made. And since I was a child, oil paintings have always fascinated me. So when we did the initial project, the oil paints that I had created had a very drippy texture, and they didn't really hold on the canvas. So I decided that was my mission, was to create a thick oil paint that would hold on the canvas. And so in order to do this, I looked at different fillers for oil paint. So oil paints are generally made of two parts, the pigment and the linseed oil. And then for my project, I decided my independent variable would be a filler in order to play with the texture of the paint in order to get that thickness. And so I researched what different fillers were used by companies that produce paint and what fillers were used by artists who create their own paints, and came up with 3 to test. So the furthest left is aluminum hydroxide, which is a white powder that was mixed in with each of the pigments. In the middle is titanium dioxide, which was mixed in with each of the pigments, also a powder. And the one on the right is beeswax. And actually, the art department has a block that's beeswax and paraffin wax mixed together, but it's pretty much beeswax. And so in order to create the ones with the powders, I would mix it with the pigment, and in order to create the paint, I would add drop by drop linseed oil and fold with palette knives the oil, the pigment into the oil until I got the thickness I desired, and then I put it onto the canvas. And so that's how I did those 2. And for the third one, I had to combine the beeswax in a different way because it wasn't a powder. So I had to slowly melt it into the linseed oil itself and then add that to the pigment. And so across all 3 paintings, I kept the pigments consistent so that I could compare them easily. And so with the aluminum hydroxide, it didn't affect the color in any way, despite being a white powder. And it created a buttery texture to the paint, which was what I wanted, and I was able to mix the colors on the canvas without them completely combining. They stayed and they had a texture, and actually if you saw the paintings, they're 3D, you can touch them, you can feel each of the brush strokes, which I loved. The titanium dioxide had actually greatly affected the color, which was not desired. So the pink on the bottle is actually the same red that's in the rose on the left, and the blue is the same blue that's in the sky with the rose, and the gray is actually just the pure black. And so that wasn't desired, and it also created a very sticky texture to the paint. And the reason it changed the color is because titanium dioxide actually has a very high refractive index, which means it doesn't, light won't penetrate it, and so unlike the aluminum hydroxide, and so that's where the 2 differed. And the best result paint-wise was actually with the beeswax, which is most commonly used amongst artists. And the beeswax created paint that moved very easily, and it stayed on the canvas and held itself, and it was very enjoyable to paint with, and it was. And the reason that the beeswax worked the best is because, unlike the powders, which were suspended in the oil, the beeswax was actually heated and mixed in, so it was able to combine with the oil and create a thicker consistency, as opposed to these, which just sort of added more to the oil itself. But I was very excited to speak to you today because this class is actually very important to me. When I heard about it last year, I'm a very science-oriented student. I actually went to a STEM charter school in middle school, and I've known that I've had an interest in chemistry for a long time, and since I was a kid I've been taking art lessons, but that's always been something on the side. I never thought that the two could mix, and this class actually showed me that that was entirely possible, as you've heard from the other kids, but I never seriously considered it. But I'm actually looking at a lot of double majors that have been open to me because of this class, and I might be able to actually combine those two passions because of this class, so that's exciting.
Yes. I'm sure her father is proud.
So the style of painting using thick paint on canvas and just sort of globbing it on without thinning it out is impasto, so I called my project Mission Impasto.
Thank you for sharing. That was an excellent presentation.
I have been elected to conclude. So thank you for letting us come here, and thank you for letting some of our students share their projects. Honestly, I wish they all could have come because they all got so into these projects. It was wonderful to see, and it's always great to see students get into it, but it's even better when they get more into it than you think they're going to, and they actually delve into not just the art, not just the science, but that boundary between the two. And that was what we really saw them doing with this project that we really had hoped that they would get, and that they actually did get to.
That's wonderful.
Just for me, I am really excited to it's amazing as an educator to, open doors and watch your students just run through with enthusiasm, and it just it's kind of mind blowing, because sometimes you can present an idea and you hear nothing but crickets in the room, but I never hear crickets in this classroom. There's always excitement. There's always an engagement, and the dialogue between the students and myself and all of us, just having that constant go around with ideas is so enriching for me, and for I hope for the students. I think it is. I've learned a lot.
That's fantastic.
And thank you so much for having
thank
us.
you. Would you be open to entertaining some questions from the board?
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
So excellent presentation all, and thank you for bringing this to us. How many were enrolled in the course?
There's 16 enrolled in the course.
16? And did it max out, or did you have room for more?
We had room for 16 more.
16 more?
Yeah. We originally, when we wrote the class, we had a class size max of 32. Our original idea was that we would physically split the students between the art room and the science room. So, Dr. Campbell would do the sciencey stuff in her room, and I would do the arty stuff in my classroom, and then we would flip-flop and go back and forth.
I actually think it's worked out better this way, though, with us all in the same room.
That was going to be my next question.
In which case we'd be capped at 24.
Yeah, okay. That works for me.
That was going to be my next question. Do you find it sounds like
I think it's
worked better
it's way
this
better
way.
with both of us, because she'll be talking about the art and she'll say, I don't know why this happens, and I'll stick up my hand and say, oh, this is why. Or I'll be talking about the science and she'll jump in, and it works really well having us
a constant dialogue.
A dialogue rather than a
I'm seeing
monologue.
a lot of grins and head nods from your students, so I think they agree that it worked out well that way. So that's a great unintentional consequence. Some things that whenever these types of presentations come before us, I notice that there's a common theme, and I've shared this with Dr. McLaughlin several times, that when I asked the question, was this a science class or was this an art class, I think it's great that we found a way to get to to educating those that might not really want to take a science class or might not really want to take an art class or be able to take an art class. So this is fantastic, and these interdisciplinary courses are wonderful. This is great testament, as with the other ones that have come before us already. And I hope that we're able to offer more. And I really hope that other districts in the area come to Merrimack and view what great work we're doing here, and can use that to springboard into their own districts. The other comment that was made that really stuck out to me is one of the students said that she felt like she was able to work with others that may not be able to, at first, may not have any common shared interests, and this has opened her eyes. And I think that right there is probably the biggest testament to your class, to be able to have someone walk away with that impression that, you've made a lasting impression on this person. And I think if even 1/10 of your students get that, you've succeeded. So thank you very much, and well done.
Vice Chair Barnes.
I asked the same of our last groups, but how are standards-based grades measured for each subject area? Is this a single or double block class? I should have asked that first.
It's a single.
So
it's a single block class, and it goes for the entire year.
So does that mean that students earn 1 or 2 credits?
They earn half a credit of art and half a credit of science. So they earn one whole credit for the year.
Okay, so that was my next question. So how's it divvied up? So how are standards-based grades kind of measured when you consider, I think you have a lot of, crossover. I think it was harder to ask in the last group than this one, but.
Well, it's funny, actually, if you look at our standards, you can actually see the overlap. So we have, in our class, we have 6. We have 2 art, 2 science, and 2 what we call dual competencies that actually focus on that creative/scientific process, because it is, perfectly found in both disciplines. And so we look at the different projects that the students do, and we look for those competencies in the projects that they complete.
Gotcha. And I had a question, because science has so many broad areas, so many specific areas of. So, what kind of science and what kind of art credit do they get? Like, if you were to put it on your transcript, what kind of science would it cover?
So we've been covering a little bit of everything. So as you heard, we had the biology with the coral reefs. We had a little bit more of the chemistry involved with them making their own paint. I'm a chemistry person, so I probably tend a little bit more towards the chemistry. But in terms of a specific, like, is it bio or chem, it's not any of that. It's just a generic overall, like a general science, rather than a specific physical science or biological science.
And would that be more of an elective credit then versus a core credit? And for art, same?
Well, an art credit, there's a painting credit is the same as a sculpture credit, is the same as a art, it's a half a credit of art, so it's more broad, but the competency overlapping is very different.
And for an art student that's going on, of course, I'm asking you that because where do the kids focus if they major in the arts? They're going to major in sculpture or paint. Where would this fall? Where could some of this work fall in their portfolios?
Mostly this would fall in the category of good working practice. Because they're learning process, they're learning how to articulate their process, they're learning many of the things that go into they are exploring their own process and having a very linear, I guess is the best way of saying it, way of looking at their process, which will help them a lot, because in art schools now, so when they go on to art schools, they get asked a lot of questions about their process and what their thinking was, what was their goals, what was their intent, and they need to articulate that. So in the sense of preparing them for the future art world, they're well ahead of the game because they're used to articulating their process. Most art students don't get a chance to verbally articulate or even written articulate their process, and art colleges are asking for a lot more of that kind of explanation.
And that's a great selling point to the course. That's exactly where I was kind of going with the question. And I guess the final question is, I heard some who are art-centric who are finding love for science, some science-centric who are finding love for art, or finding more, love for art. So, of the 16 students this year, what would you say was your more common student? Would you say it was a split, more science-based finding art, or vice versa?
So it's tough to divvy up all of them into that category because it was a new class, and so part of trying to get students to take the new class was I talked to some of my students and she talked to some of her students. So this year it does seem to be a good split of people who came at it because their science teacher told them to, and people who came at it because their art teacher told them to.
So, and honestly, it's about growing the number of students that enroll, and
Yes.
where do you see the largest area of growth to get to your numbers, and even maybe offer more sections of that class in the future if demand provides it. So is there a goal to attract from both, I guess, areas of interest to grow that course in your course of study?
So I think it definitely benefits you to have students from both mindsets there, just like it benefits the students to have both of us there. This class wouldn't work nearly as well if it were just an art teacher teaching the class or just a science teacher teaching the class. Having those opposing but similar viewpoints and being able to see that they are similar viewpoints when you don't necessarily realize they will be, even though you're coming at it from two completely different angles, has benefited us greatly. And I think it's benefited the students, having the students come at it from those different backgrounds.
And my last question was regarding future coursework, because obviously this is like a great foundation course. Is there talk about more collaboration between the art and science department for additional potential courses down the road? No pressure.
Well, actually, it's kind of funny you ask, because I was talking to a math teacher today, and we're working on it right now. We're working on origami. And there's a great documentary called Between the Folds, where I was introduced to this idea of origami being an incredible math tool, but also an incredible science tool. So, it's basically, when you know anything about the arts, you know that it's everywhere. And so, just the idea of origami and learning about origami can lead someone to learning about protein folding or the unfolding of a telescope in space. And those are real-world examples of people using a seemingly just artistic thing, paper folding, and creating amazing technology and amazing scientific innovation from this act of paper folding. So, as far as growing the class, I was talking to Mr. Farnsworth, and I told him about the origami, and he's like, "Can I be a guest lecturer?" So, he wants to come in on it, too. Everybody wants in on it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Those are my questions.
Are you
We're
all
all set?
set?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr.
Thank you.
McLaughlin. If I could just add, I might be speaking out of turn, but I'm not sure. I think you might have been having some early conversations with Mr. Polly in the automotive department, possibilities about collaborating around welding. So that's just another answer to the question. And in addition, I think right now the high school culture is just expanding daily almost. The more experiences that educators and students have with these combinations that might on the face not seem self-evidently connected, but then with just a tiny bit of investigation are and can be with really creative educators, I think there's no end to the kind of work that can be done. So to answer your question, there's lots that's unfolding that might not even be seen by us today.
Right. And I'm seeing the passion of the students, which kind of really created the line of questioning. I only had a couple before the students started talking about where this could go, but you're seeing such diversity in the way that they're presenting their ideas. It gets us wondering how far this could go and how much they would take on given the opportunity for us to offer it. So that was awesome. So thank you, especially students, because you really did open up our minds to all the things that you're doing and where your passion is. And I see you guys are really enjoying this class just by the way you were presenting it. So thank you very much.
Ms. Guagliumi.
I just wanted to say I love the interdisciplinary courses, and I think to be able to learn through different lenses is such a great and creative way to learn for the students. And I'm sure you guys learned a lot from each other as educators, trying to approach it from the different angles. And as you mentioned about, you know, how there's so much overlap. I mean, even math in the class that you just taught, you know, if you're decreasing the size of a crocheted project, you need to get half the amount of, or how many parts paint do you mix in, or pigment do you mix in? I mean, there's so much that it's just, you know, so many opportunities, as was previously stated. And thank you for all of the work that you did to be able to bring this to our students. I just had a question regarding next year. Are there any new opportunities that as you work together you realized you might try next year, or how you might approach it differently? What are your thoughts on that? Not to put you on the spot.
Well, so as we've been doing the course this year, we've actually kind of veered off from what we originally thought we were going to do based on our interest and student interest. And so, you know, we actually made our own pencils. So we spent like two weeks making our own pencils. We thought it was just going to be a one-day thing, but we got into it, the kids got into it, and so it was just this really neat process. And so that led us into doing something else, and we had a thought, oh, well, we could also make our own ink, but we never quite got there. And so it might be one of those things where the class, I could envision it changing a little bit from year to year based on what the students actually seem interested in. You know, one group might really get into the paper folding, whereas another group might really like, you know, making their own paint in the process with that.
It's a living process. You know, when you're in the classroom, it's, you know, you respond to what's going on in front of you. It makes for the most dynamic dialogue with the students, is to find out what they're interested in and pursue it.
All set. Mr. Marcus.
So I think that all of the benefits that you've been describing are awesome, and I agree with everything that everyone else has already said. But just to look at the disadvantages, I would assume, and just cut me off if I'm wrong, but in the class you're not doing a ton of in-depth study of the mole or force diagrams or cellular biology. So do you feel like the fact that even though you touch a little bit on everything, do you feel like there is some science education that's being lost when kids choose this class as a substitute to the more traditional science classes? Or do you think that this adequately fills it in?
So it's not a substitute to the more traditional science classes. Actually, one of our requirements is that students have to have already taken physical science and biology before they can take the class. And so it's an elective in addition to not replacing any of the traditional classes. I also, as a science person, think that it's beneficial to not paint yourself into a corner sometimes. I am a chemist, and I mean, you heard what I said earlier. I went into the physics building, and that was an unusual day. But that being said, the world around us, there's physics, there's biology, there's a little bit of everything, and you benefit yourself by knowing a little bit about everything and being able to look at something and understand it because you have background knowledge in a wider base rather than just that super narrow focus.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
There's too many microphones, but yet there aren't any back here. No. This is really good. As Cinda said, interdisciplinary classes are always exciting because they pull out things from either side you didn't know that existed. And my wife is a math teacher in another district, and she does the same sorts of things, tries to mix science with math and sometimes art. And it brings to mind a video that it's old. It was made like in the 50s. But anybody that has a chance to see the video called Donald in Math Magic Land, it's a Disney movie that was made in the 50s that talks about blending science and math with art and how all the artists and the music and sound blends together, because that's almost the fundamentals of what you guys are doing, to use the science and the math to build with the art and vice versa. So I really look forward to, over the years, seeing how this advances, how we bring them together, because when students leave, they had applying themselves and be able to grow in the real world. I mean, we use in like you do in education, but in the industries we work in, we use a mix of things all the time. So interdisciplinary has a lot of advantages. Now, to get to Jake's point about, is it raw rote science or math or something, you have to have the fundamentals before you can then take it into the interdisciplinary. So I think it's great that you're building on top of what they know and giving them stuff they didn't think about. So
I laughed because I own Donald in Math Magic Land.
You'd be surprised. My wife is a math teacher trying to find a copy. We're scouring eBay and other stuff because we lost the one we had. So
I want to thank you and the students for the presentation. As the students were discussing it, frankly, as you were discussing it, you hit upon a few things that are a part of the logic model that we recently extended, and that's student-directed learning in the aim of creating lifelong learners. And it's very clear from the students who participated tonight that you have piqued their curiosity. You've empowered them to do the research and experimentation in order to continue that line of inquiry. So thank you for that. And additionally, as educators, you've done something that you've encouraged your students to do, which is fail forward. We've talked about this at the table. The whole idea of experimentation, not being worried about failing, but actually making discoveries in failure, is huge. And I imagine as you've pulled together this class, you've probably failed forward. Like the pencils, right, was a good example, right? It wasn't exactly what you thought it would be, but you took it and you went with it. That's fantastic. I actually think that's a very positive thing. When you talked at the beginning about the segregation of science and art, what's interesting to me is liberal arts applicants, people who are going to study the liberal arts, apply to a college of arts and sciences, right? It includes chemistry, art, humanities, languages, etc. It's not linear. It's a circle, almost the donut of learning. And so, I'm glad to see that what we're doing is encouraging a liberal arts approach to learning here in the district. So thank you. And great job, students, and that includes you, Gabby. Very proud of you. Thank you. And so as the lights come up and our students go home to complete homework, we will move to item number 6, review of the outcome from the non-public board meeting on February 8th, 2016. I will turn to Board Member Schneider, who is our lead negotiator, to give us an update on the contract.
Sure. So I'll try to spend a few minutes sort of summarizing at a high level the contract and a few pieces of information and why there was a non-public that was held last week and the outcome of that. So the contract that the school board negotiated with the MTA, we talked about a warrant article 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, where there was a total spend of approximately $750,000 in the first year to reflect incremental cost items based on that agreement. I wanted to just at a high level say that there were several areas that we as a board looked at in terms of the contract. this time around. One was around competitive compensation to the teachers. Second was around both encouraging academic achievement, but also encouraging to try to bring new and younger teachers into the district through various initiatives. And also, one of the big areas is around healthcare, because as we look at cost drivers for the contract, healthcare is certainly a big part. So when you look at the cost drivers and the cost summaries for the warrant article, you'll see that there's 3% increases per year for the 3 years. That's the lion's share of that $750,000. 3% may sound like a lot, but one of the things we looked at was competitive and how we matched up against all the other districts in our area, because as we need to attract new teachers into the district. So both the MTA as well as the district did research and found that even with a 3% increase, there's still room for us as a district to grow, because there's still districts that pay from a salary standpoint higher. So that's where that number came from in terms of compensation that way. We also added the other major cost item. We added $30,000 to the professional development fund to specifically targeted at teachers getting compensated for taking advanced degrees, post bachelor's, so masters and other graduate degrees, because as we know, we as a board have, and as a district, have tried to get more and more teachers achieving higher academic levels. So we figured that we would put some additional funds into that. We added about 20% to what we contributed to that. We are continuing to offer opportunities for there's people moving behind me. There's things flying. The other things from a cost driver perspective, there are also we retain some of the things in the contract from before around some retirement incentives to encourage our more senior teachers that are ready to retire, encourage a movement so we could bring more younger teachers into the district. And we did these primary things and not a significant change from past agreements. But one of the big areas that we did focus on this time around was when you talk about healthcare. And this really gets to the point of why we had a discussion last under non-public around this. We as a school district in the third year of the current contract, the healthcare contribution that's based off the HMO that we do is 85-15. So the teachers contribute 15% of their salary of their healthcare, not their salary, sorry, their healthcare cost. They contribute 15%. The district is 85, and that is the third year. It's where we've leveled. It's among the best of all the contracts within the town of Merrimack in terms of healthcare contribution by the employees. This time around, based on a lot of research that we've done around healthcare in the current environment around the Affordable Health Care Act and trends that we're seeing in the industry, this current contract leaves the 85-15 in place for the coming year, and rather tries to put into effect the ability of the district to add additional health care options to the members of the MTA, to the teachers during this contract period of time. These are a wider variety. We don't remove any plans. We simply are adding incremental ones through the life, ones that might be more attractive to teachers from a cost perspective, and ones that frankly can save the district significant health care dollars as well. One of the things that the reason that we had a non-public last week is that there was a difference in interpretation of a couple of clauses within the contract between the Teachers Association and the school board, and we reached a change in a minor change in those that we have both agreed to. That allows us during the second year and beyond of the agreement to add additional plans, including a site of service, which will reach some benefits to the district as well as to the teachers. So the during the non-public, we because we did make a change, we re-voted on the teachers' contract. The vote was in favor of the amended contract 3-1-0, with board member Ortega recusing himself in the vote. So that is just a high-level summary of what the contract covered. The district is starting with tonight and through the week is putting details on the agreement out on the website. My understanding is, and I just verified this a few minutes ago, is that the details on the cost items for the warrant article for the teacher's contract is on the district webpage as we speak. And then during the week, some additional details will be added. If someone wants to know more about the details of the spend items in the contract itself, they can contact the SAU office and business business administrator. I would say business head guru guy, but Matt Chevenel will be able to provide that additional information, but is going to be posted out on the website as well. So that's sort of a summary of the contract and why we voted last week. But I think that it's a contract that will be put in front of the voters the way it is during the deliberative session, then finally the vote in April. So,
thank you. Everyone good? Okay. And so now we will move to item number 7, review of the outcome from the Budget Committee's public hearing and work session. I'll turn to our Budget Committee liaison, Mr. Davis Powell.
Well, as I reported in previous committee reports, each of the departments and the SAU office came before the Budget Committee, presented their budget, answered questions. The Budget Committee was able to get more in depth, or did get more in depth with some specific questions, and it was a very good session back and forth. The department heads were very well prepared, as always, and anticipated a lot of questions, and I think cleared some things up for some of the Budget Committee members as well. Ultimately, what came down, what is going on the warrant is the Budget Committee took votes on the financial items only. Article number 3, which is the contract, was voted to recommend by the Budget Committee 10-0 and 1 abstention. The Article number 5, which is taking 10% or $75,000 of this year's surplus and putting it into the Emergency District Repair Fund, was also recommended by the Budget Committee at the same vote of 10-0 and 1 abstention. And Article number 7, the operating budget itself, was unanimously recommended to go forward at 11-0. It was a very uneventful budget season, I guess we should say, but very informative for all those on the committee.
Great. Thank you. All set? Okay. And that will take us now to item number 9, or actually number 8, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Preparation for warrant presentations for deliberative session on March 8th, 2016. So at deliberative session, we will, the moderator will look for each of the warrant articles from 2 through 7 for someone to move and second those items. I've got a thought in terms of having folks perhaps be the first and the second to spread first and seconds around the table, as it were. And so just let me know if you agree to this or not. The first is the article related to the acceptance of gifts and property. Vice Chair Barnes, would you be willing to move that item? Sure. Okay. And Mr. Schneider, would you be willing to second that? Okay. The next is the Teachers Association contract. Typically, it's usually the lead and second negotiator who move and second that respectively. So, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Powell, as a first and a second. Then there is the warrant article in case the contract fails to hold a special meeting. Mr. Powell, do you want to move that. Ms. Guagliumi, would you second that? Okay. And then Article 5 is the Repair Capital Reserve Fund. Ms. Guagliumi, would you move that? And then Vice Chair Barnes, would you second that? Article 6, which relates to management expenses for capital reserve and trust funds, are going to be moved by Trustee Christensen, and he has said that he would more than likely get another trustee to make the second and then speak to that. If for some reason a trustee isn't available, I'm sure one of us, I'm more than happy to second the motion, seeing as I haven't signed up for anything. And then lastly is Article 7, which is the school district operating budget, which gets moved and seconded by the Budget Committee. So, makes sense? Good. Okay, great. That will move us on now, finally. I knew it wouldn't take long. To the proposed school calendar for 2016-2017. Superintendent Chaffrey.
Thank you. The first thing I'm going to say is that when you arrived at your place tonight, you should have received some material that I had been in receipt of from the Merrimack Teachers Association and the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association. Each one of those organizations, by contract, gives me how they see the calendar, and I use that definitely in my deliberations. I forgot to put that enclosure in your envelope, but you will be looking at this probably for the next half of the month, so I wanted you to be able to use that material. As I go through, I want to highlight the givens, and when I say the givens, these are things that really we can't change. And what I would hope is that when you share this with the public, which you normally are wont to do, that we would put out the givens for people, because very often they will want to change some things that just can't be changed. So the first one is that teachers can't start the school year before the Monday prior to Labor Day. So that's a given, because that's a part of a contractual agreement. And the 2 days that are holidays by law are Veterans Day and Memorial Day, so they must be locked in place. Another given for this next year, after having conferred with the town moderator who oversees voting and having experienced primary day on February 9th, would be that we would have school closed on that day, no matter what polling place is used, if it's the high school and other places. But given the fact that we feel that there will be a greater volume than we experienced on February 9th, I would recommend that that day be a day off from school. This is not a given, but I would say it's certainly a request of most people that we never have a February or an April vacation that is concurrent with Massachusetts. And so, trust me, I have gathered up several Massachusetts calendars to ensure that that would not happen. And before I go through all the dates, I think the other thing that we've learned over time is the significance of the August Academy for educators. This has become really a part of who we are. And we've also learned from parents how important it is for us to front end, if you will, the workshops for the faculty, as parents really would prefer that as compared to having workshops throughout the year, when in fact it is so very difficult to find daycare. So I set the stage by telling you these things, and then we'll walk through the calendar for our public. So it would be the intent, the proposed intent, to start teacher workshops or the faculty coming back together on August 29th, which is a Monday, and taking that all the way to September 2nd. So it would be 1 day in the classroom, the initial day, 3 days for the August Academy, and the last day of the week on Friday would be for them, again, to be back in their respective building having meetings. Labor Day is on Monday the 5th. Therefore, the first day of school would be September 6th. And I think we learned also from the public how important it was for their children to start school in September. Columbus Day is being proposed as a day off, which is October 10th. November 8th, as I highlighted before, is Election Day. November 11th, which occurs on a Friday this year, is one of those days by law we must have off, Veterans Day. You'll see when you look at the teachers' recommendations that once again, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is probably the most important day for them, and they highlight that in their information, which would mean then that the Thanksgiving holiday would be Wednesday, the 23rd of November until the 25th. The holiday recess for in December would be from the 26th up until the 30th. So in other words, we would go the full week, including December 23rd. In January this last year, you remember we had Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a school day, and we heard from at least one member of the public that they would be hopeful that we would be able to take that day in the future. So you'll see I have marked January 16th as being a day that we would honor Martin Luther King. Winter recess would occur February 27th to March 3rd. When you look at that, you'll see it's later than normal, but again, that's because the Massachusetts schools are going to be out the week of the 20th of February. In April, the same thing is true. I've pulled the fourth week because Massachusetts has off the week of the 17th. We go the week thereafter. May 29th is that other day I talked by law we must have off to honor Memorial Day. And if we had no inclement weather days whatsoever, our last day would be June 15th. So I give this over to you for your consideration and would hope to have it back for at least discussion on March 7th, as well as I know in the past you've wanted to pass this out to ask what people are thinking.
Great. Are there questions or comments? Mr. Powell, then Vice Chair Barnes.
Marge, I know that Veterans Day is by law we have to observe that day. Do we have any leeway on when that day can be observed? And the reason I'm asking is, can we move it to the following Monday?
No, the only time is if it falls on a Saturday or Sunday. But if it falls on the actual day, it is the day.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Barnes.
A couple questions. First of all, we received a letter from a parent a few weeks ago regarding NHIA events and midterms and how our students' first day of school actually threw midterms into the same period where NHIA is having some of their playoffs. So is there any, I guess, comparison, or does NHIA have their projected calendar out for next year regarding things like events and playoffs?
I would have to tell you that I did not look at NHIA's calendar, so that's something certainly I can do. But I will tell you a lot of our sister school districts start earlier in August. So in other words, if their teachers come back a week prior to when we start, then that's what causes this to happen. And so we, by contract, cannot start any earlier than August 29th.
And I do understand that, but I think what we're looking at is with midterms, that's something we do have a little control over, the dates. So as we're talking about when we're scheduling things, if there's a possibility, and I don't know if there is or not, to
and
schedule
so what
midterms.
we try to do, Shannon, is to look at each quarter and have a similar number of days. What you're trying to do is to get as close to 45 a quarter as you can. So what I will just tell you is the high school has gone through the calendar and has looked at it from that effect. What I will do in the interim of time is to see what I can find out about NHIA, but I did not look at this year and so on.
I think that might be helpful because I think the kids want to excel in both areas, and we don't want to make it harder than if we can get around it. I'm not saying that there's a fix, but if we can take a look, that'd be great. You have mentioned one of my other questions. You hit on where other schools' first day in South Central region, so a lot of them are starting in August, correct?
There are some systems that will start on August 22nd or prior to.
Wow, okay.
Yep.
And then the question that follows on that is schools where we send kids for vocational technical education, Nashua, Hudson. How is our calendar going to align with those schools' calendars, and making sure that they don't lose too much instruction? So those are the questions. I know you may not have them at your fingertips, but those are questions I generally have. I have a comment, and that is the election, and it's going to cause another day off from school. And I know that as a district, my entire time on the board, we have always had the Wednesday before Thanksgiving off, but that's a lot of missed instructional time in November. So just a consideration to maybe for this year, if we do decide as a board that we want to put school in session the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, only considering that we should scientifically measure absenteeism and the impact that it has on us doing our job as a district if we choose to do so. But it's something I think because of the election, that's 5 instructional days in November that are going to be lost. So it's the only reason I'm even considering it, because normally I think it's appreciated by families, but that's a lot of time off. And they may have to take time off considering that they'll be with their kids on Election Day. So just things for us to consider, but that's just a thought I have up front looking at this calendar that we may want to discuss as a board. And of course, if we don't measure the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of that decision, then it's a bad decision overall. So thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
So a couple of observations and a couple of comments. So what's interesting to me is this is probably the shortest Christmas holiday break that one could have given the way the calendar is, because typically we'll have an entire week and then a day or two straggle on either end. But this year, because Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve both fall on Saturdays, it means that we go through school through Friday, and then we return the following Monday with only 1 week off. So that's one of the reasons why, even though we start on the 6th of September and get out on the 15th of June, one of the reasons is because we lose a couple days that would normally be holidays, which could have an effect on when the finals are. I mean, it's like a puzzle piece here, and this is the first time I've really looked at it closely. A couple of comments. One that will come up probably by people because when we send this out to get input. One surrounds the fact that teachers' workshops are still at the beginning of the year. I think that what we observed both through the contract negotiations as well as discussions at this table, the benefits of having the workshops at the beginning of the year in a very combined, formalized, what we call August Academy, rather than sprinkling the workshops through the year, provides more benefit as far as education and advancement of our staff and preparation for the year. I think we've seen some very tangible benefits there. So I wanted first to just make a comment that I think that this board strongly stands behind having those the way it is, which sort of caused the 6th to be the first day. The other thing is that there'll be also likely be comments from people about why we didn't look at teachable hours during this year. And I'd like to encourage folks to, if they have questions, we had a fairly in-depth discussion with the Sauhegan District about what they went through with teachable hours. And what we learned, at least what my takeaway was, is that it's extremely complex when you're looking about all the different schools, all the interrelationships between all the different programs, sporting schedules, and things like that. I think that we as a board likely will take this up as discussion, but it's not something that you can just turn over the next year. So both in terms of our negotiations as well as this calendar we're looking at, we didn't ignore it completely, but rather the timing and we have to do it in a mindful way. So these are just a couple comments I had in looking at this.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Marcus.
And just to speak to Vice Chair Barnes' point about the conflict with midterms and the NHIAA schedule, since this year Labor Day fell as late as it possibly could in September, so we were kind of starting 2 weeks after everyone else. So, and again, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's ever been a conflict before this year. So it shouldn't be an issue in the upcoming year, and it won't be for another 5 years, I think. So the administration might want to look at that in another 5 years, but I don't think it should be an issue in the coming calendar years.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Maybe it may not be. I have to imagine that what you're saying might actually be true, in that I think the other thing that makes us distinct is, even though we're perhaps starting school in September, other districts don't front load their teacher workshop days the way that we do, and so over time they wind up taking more of those as well, and so that by the time we get to midterms, we might be closer in alignment. The other challenge, frankly, is other boards are going through exactly the same exercise we're going through now, right? And so for the superintendent to come back to us with a fixed answer in terms of what every other district is doing is a little bit of looking into the crystal ball. We know what they've done in the past. We might even know what they've proposed, but they may not have actually set their calendars yet. But we should try to take all the concerns that have been raised into consideration and look at them. The one thing that I will suggest that we do, as we have in years past, is to get the word out through Power School and handouts at the schools that are not fully on Power School, if any still exist, and request feedback on the calendar. So publish this proposed calendar, have folks send that feedback in so that at our next meeting on the 7th of March, we can review this. So hopefully by the last day of February, that'll give some time to assimilate the results and see what people are thinking. Yes, Mr. Schneider.
So in addition to what you just described, the Power School portal and the handouts, can we also post this on the main district website
yeah.
and also on the application thing too? So it's really, I'd rather over communicate than under in this one, because I'd like people to be able to chime in with their thoughts to make sure we get a really good
and I think
set of feedback.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what we did last year, but if it's not, it's a great idea. Right. Ms. Gualiumi.
So I wanted to say that I have a meeting with Marge and Mark tomorrow regarding some communication initiatives. And Chris, I think you're planning on attending as well. One of the items that I wanted to discuss was about communicating this particular item with stakeholders, with parents, and how we might use the tools that we have and get something a little more automated, like a survey, online survey, SurveyMonkey, whatever.
Great.
And get some feedback on that. So more to come.
Great. Thank you. Excellent. Anything else on calendar? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 10, drug awareness initiatives in the Merrimack community. Dr. Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you. I would frame this really as an update and a follow-up to the last board meeting. As you recall, we had a very good and vigorous conversation about drug awareness and drug awareness initiatives in the Merrimack School District, and we'll continue to do it. We have had that conversation for a long time, and we'll continue to do it. I think it's just important to restate the obvious, which is that the entire school district takes this matter very seriously. And it's also important to say that we rely on data to make judgments about the dimensions of the challenge that we face as a public school district. And it's also worth bearing in mind, just to state the obvious, that Merrimack is not unique in that it faces challenges as any community does that has any students living in it or any people living in them. And Merrimack is no exception. And so we rely on data to make judgments about the dimension of that challenge. And at the last board meeting, as you recall, the chief of police and the high school principal provided data to the board about the dimensions of that challenge, relying on verified statistics from the perspective of the community as represented by the chief and the school as represented by the principal. And it remains the goal of administration to continue to rely on data to further define the scope of the challenge, to allow the board to have the information it needs to make informed decisions. And toward that end, I just want to say a few things that we've attempted to do since the last time we spoke. Merrimack Safeguard is very fortunate in that because it is connected to a federal grant, we have connections that other districts don't have by virtue of that grant. And one of those connections comes in the name of a person named Sidney Kimbrough. Sidney is the person in charge of managing the Community Safeguard grants for the Northeast region. She's based in Washington, D.C., and she helps us with a number of things, not least the financial part of the grant. But in addition to that, Sidney is really a nationally recognized scholar on the issue of substance abuse among youth. And because we have that connection, I spoke to Sidney after our last meeting. And I tried to describe to her some of the things that our board and our community would benefit from knowing or understanding. And one of those things was to continue to try to define what is it that we are talking about when we're talking about substance abuse. What are the markers that we look for to indicate the dimensions of the challenge? And we had the chief of police and the principal of the high school, two pretty qualified people to speak on it. And in addition to that, Sidney provided some examples of data sources that we could use that could help to further define that. And so off of that, I have connected with other members of Merrimack Safeguard to begin to generate that information. I'll give you some examples. Poison Control has data and information about the use of substances and the number of times that substance abuse issues, whether it's suicidal ideation or overdose and so on, or calls coming from a community seeking information or help. That's not definitive information, but it's another data point. Trips to emergency rooms. There is information that can be made available that speaks to another set of data that can speak to a dimension. Again, none of this is going to fully describe or fully answer, but if the issue is how can we further determine the extent of the issue we're talking about such that the board can make informed decisions about what to do, Sidney, a nationally recognized expert in the field, recommended that. So off of that, I contacted Bev Doolin, who is the program director for public health in the city of Nashua, and Merrimack falls in her regional area of support, and Lisa Vasquez, who is the director of Beyond Influence in the southern New Hampshire region, to both generate information that Sidney suggested we look into that could be provided to the board. Now, I want to be mindful that when I spoke to both Sidney and Bev and Lisa, one of the things they cautioned was privacy concerns. And so we are challenged with wanting to generate data that would come from those sources, but be very mindful that we must do nothing to expose or highlight individuals. And so we have to be very, very careful about that. So it's one thing to want to seek it, and it's another thing, once you have the information, you have to be very careful about it. And so I'm trying to share with the board publicly the challenge there. So on the one hand, it's providing data that you need, and on the other hand, it's our obligation to preserve the privacy rights of citizens. And so I share with you that that's a challenge and that it continues to be something that we're going to be working on. But I want you to know that we're working on that, and that within the next few meetings we'll have some more information to provide to you. It's also important to talk about connecting to the broader community. And Sydney was very articulate about this. She said in every community that has had healthy response to the substance abuse issue, whatever its dimension, it involves necessarily a broad community dialogue. And so she, in her capacity, has made overtures to even travel to Merrimack and support a dialogue around that with our community. Whether that's something that we choose to have her do or not, we have a lot of individuals who can do that as well, Lisa Vasquez being one. And so we are in the process right now of talking about what would that look like to bring students and community together in a facilitated way to both name the challenge and its dimensions, whatever they be, and to seek community response to addressing them. And so I'm very encouraged by Sydney's offer of support. It's no small thing to have her willingness to do that. And so we'll have much more to say in the weeks to come about what that might actually look like. But there's something very positive in the wind there. And I guess I'll conclude by saying this is just an update. What have we tried to do since our last meeting to further the conversation that was begun a few weeks ago? I say begun a few. We've been having this conversation for a long time, but at the board level most recently. And I'll just put in another plug for Merrimack Safeguard. If we're, just my opinion speaking only for me, if we're serious as a community about addressing this, then we have a venue in Merrimack right now of very influential people representing influential sectors that meets monthly, the first Thursday of every month at St. James Church at 6 o'clock. And I welcome and encourage the participation of the community in that constructive dialogue. And I would welcome people's participation. I'd welcome their insight into how to generate interest to have community members come to a community-wide discussion, what they'd like to learn from that, how we might get the word out about publicizing it so that people come. We've had lots of experience of people who've come from outside. The special ed parent group has hosted some pretty powerful and high-profile events that the community has benefited from. We'd like to follow their lead in terms of publicizing. And if I'm honest, it can't be just a small group of people trying to figure that out. So I hope that people know where St. James Church is, and we have open doors and welcome you on Thursday evenings to come and be part of the solution. So I think that Board Member Gualiumi asked also if there could be an update on the curriculum end of what we're trying to do. And Marge and I, conferring, are prepared to bring to you over the next few weeks just further updates, and so that will be forthcoming at the next one, and I will be able to talk about that avenue as well. So we continue to try to support as much as we can the board's need to have good data about what we're doing, and we'll continue over the next few weeks and beyond, obviously, to provide that to you. But tonight was just an attempt to provide follow-up that we really are trying to move on this, and we're doing as many things as we can using the resources that we have to provide you with good information. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. Mr. Schneider.
So, Dr. McLaughlin, in your discussions with the people that you've been talking with, have you expressed to them sort of the other proposals that the school board has been I'm going to use the wrong word, not confronted with, but exposed to, in terms of, like, you know, the effectiveness of dogs and things like that as part of it? Does that come up in the discussion? And is there a sort of a readout as far as the effectiveness, how that fits as a tool at all, or what it is as part of their program or their ideas?
Yes, it has come up. And Sydney has a wide reach. so her reach is twofold. Her reach is regional in that she works with the Northeast region, and her reach is national in that she works for the federal government in the CADCA, the substance abuse part of the Department of Health. And her experience is that canines are relatively rarely used. This is just her experience in the places that she does work. She has said that in her experience it can be a useful tool. She was very clear, however, and if she were here, she'd tell you, and when she comes, she'll tell you, so I'm confident in characterizing it this way, that there can be no substitute for the trust that we have talked so much about, that the Principal Johnson talked so much about. There can be no substitute for that. So in her experience, where it has worked, it has only worked when it's been part of an educational initiative. And so we've talked, that's her experience, and she's expressed her knowledge based on dealing at the national and regional level. That's her experience.
I want to thank you for following up, making the calls, doing the legwork to gather the information that the board needs in order to make informed decisions about this. So thank you. And that will take us to item number 11, other correspondence. In our packets, folks will see a letter from St. James United Methodist Church to the Reeds Ferry Elementary PFA that helped to fill up the food pantry. And it's a lovely letter, and the director was very, very thankful for the effort. Is there any other correspondence to come before the board? Mr. Powell.
If I'm not mistaken, we received an email about Thornton's Ferry Elementary being in the running for an award of sort, and I left my information at home, so I don't know what that is, and I'm hoping that someone can help me out.
Thornton's Ferry Elementary School is up, if you will, for the Elementary School of the Year. They're in the final competition. I believe there are 3 elementary schools in the state, and the visitation by the selection board will be mid-March, so we won't know the results probably until April.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Schneider.
2 pieces, and Cinda just reminded me, I think we got an email that was similar to what was read in the public comment about the track. We got that. But also I received an email from a resident about wanting to use the canines as part of the proactive effort with drug in the high school. So I got one of those.
Okay. And I had one email from a resident asking about the budget, specifically the psychologist position that had been discussed last year. Mr. Schneider.
And I've also been contacted just generally about the budget and the contract. So,
okay. Any other correspondence come before the board? Okay. Seeing none, comments. Vice Chair Barnes.
You should all be getting updates from the NHSBA, the Legislative Bulletin. And one that came up that I thought was very timely for us is House Bill 1687 and 1688, which are going before the House Judiciary Committee this week on Wednesday. And it's about the liability of towns and school districts on playground equipment. And I'm just going to read just a snippet from the email. It says, HB 1687 allows municipalities and school districts to be held liable for certain injuries on playground equipment. The bill focuses on skateboarding parks and playgrounds, repealing the immunity and making school districts and towns liable for injuries on any playground they own. And obviously this is something that we've been talking about quite often. So basically this is an opportunity for us as board members as individual board members, because we're not taking a position as a board, to reach out to our delegation to say how we feel about that, knowing that we want to make sure that there are positive infrastructures on our facilities that directly impact the ability to deliver a quality education, especially when you look at elementary schools. It's so important. I know that the bill also focuses on skateboard parks, and in 2018 we need to consider our responsibility if it comes into our possession at that time, and we don't take a position not to take it on. So I want us to keep an open mind on those kind of things, and if we feel we want to reach out to our constituency, we have that. We have a short opportunity to go before the Judiciary Committee gets it.
Thank you. Superintendent.
So I would just share with you that Representative Balcom, who is the vice chair of the House Education Committee, came and spent some time with Mark and me about bills that he was facing to just get our thoughts about those. We have shared our thoughts, and I have asked the delegation to come and be with you on March 7th because the crossover before the bills go to the Senate will be about mid-March. And so I don't know yet how many can come, but if we are able to get a portion of them or a group of them, we will also highlight some bills. We specifically talked about 1687 and 1688 and basically let it be known to him that if you look at our playground equipment, it has been furnished by our parent groups for the betterment of our children. And on a weekend or after school, none of us are here to monitor what goes on. And the thought of that being our liability, and liability not only for the district but individuals, just does not seem to make any sense at all. And the same would be true of a park or recreational area. So we were quite defined about that. Obviously, Jack's only one person, but we made ourselves known, I would say.
Thank you for that comment. Mr. Schneider.
So this is a comment. So after the election that happened, the situation with the election that happened last week, some have implied that the school board has withheld schools from future elections of this magnitude. We know that as a board, the only school that we've ever been requested to offer up for an election of this site has been the high school. So I know that the town council is taking up the matter of future elections, and I'd just like to say, as one member of the board, I'm certainly open to work with the council should they request something different, especially on the day when the schools are all closed. I mean, we've talked about when we're in session for town elections. That's different. This is more around the national elections where the volume is higher. So, I, as one board member, would welcome, our involvement to help in that situation as we go, if it becomes appropriate from their side.
Agreed. And I would say that, frankly, we've been willing in the past as well to work with the moderator and the council in making sure that we can provide whatever's needed in terms of election facilities. So I would hope that the future, if a request were to come forward, that we would also be viewed as working cooperatively to do so. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move to new business. Item 12. Any new business? Seeing none. Move to item 13, committee reports. Mr. Marcus.
So this past Saturday, this past Saturday was the statewide Solo and Ensemble Festival for the New Hampshire Music Educators Association, NHMEA. And our school participates in it, both the middle and the high school. And last week, I spoke, or not last week, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I spoke about Granite State Challenge, which was one example of the co-curricular funding being put to good use. And Solo and Ensemble, I feel, is almost a better example because essentially what it is students are given the opportunity to bring solos or ensembles, if the name didn't give it away, to the state to have university music adjudicators judge you and provide feedback and comments. And we field groups varying from brass quintets to woodwind choirs to a wide range of duets, trios, trombone ensemble. There's a bunch of stuff. And to try to kind of paint you a picture, they put us, while we're waiting to be called into the rooms to be judged, they put us in a big auditorium. This year it was at Keene, and there are 2 levels of seating, and one level is for Merrimack High School, and then the other level is for every other school that participates. So this is Mrs. Cunningham, the band director, is extremely proud of this fact, but we are known statewide among band directors as being the school that really shows up at solo and ensemble, and the judges frequently tell us that they're always excited for Merrimack because we are the only school that fields such a diverse range of musical opportunities. And in addition to just being the school that has all of it, it's also, I can attest as a music student, it's a great opportunity for us because we get a chance to play music that not many other kids in the state get to play, or in other states, I might add. And it's an awesome opportunity to grow as a musician, as an independent player, and as a player in a small ensemble. And that is largely thanks, or almost entirely thanks, to the co-curricular funding, because we have to order new music for this every year. We do have books that we can look through, but, for example, I played in a tuba flute duet this year, and there aren't many of those, so we have to, for many of those groups, we have to order new music every year, and it is that funding which makes it possible. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I fondly remember days at solo and ensemble. Ms. Guagliumi.
I attended a professional development meeting last Thursday. Also, I have a Parks and Rec meeting coming up this coming Wednesday. And one thing I wanted to mention during comments, so if you'll just allow me to give a sense, is just the Empty Bowls event is on Wednesday, I believe, of this week. I know it's very popular with the community. It's 6 o'clock at the high school, I believe.
Put on by the National Arts Honor Society, if I'm not mistaken.
Put on by the National Arts Honor Society. I just wanted to repeat it because I didn't know if you had your microphone on.
Oh.
It's always on.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
Brings back memories of going to solo and ensemble and large group and all the other stuff. So that's great. I'm glad that's still going on to the level it has been. I just have one committee report. I met with the Wellness Committee today, earlier today. They went through the different activities that are going on at the different schools, both for students as well as for staff in terms of wellness activities. One of the things that's starting to pick up a lot of momentum with staff are Fitbit challenges, walking, things that are more easy to do. And they're going to be approaching ways to do challenges with students. So they're going to look into some of what's allowed, what's not allowed, because so many students have Fitbits these days, and there's a lot of walking. So it's a great way for movement and to get sort of that involvement going. So that came out. And they also had discussions around, the current state of the food program, because Dave Zicki goes to those meetings and shares his latest. He's going to a conference, I think, in 2 weeks, the conference that he goes to find the latest. So we'll probably be hearing an update from that at this table. And then also they talked about outside recess and getting kids moving on cold days. It was very appropriate today because it was a pretty cold day, and sort of talked about what the policy is in the different schools and whether it needs to be adjusted or working. So they're talking about that as well. And then they also mentioned the $1,500 from Health Trust to see if they were going to get a little piece of it to be able to use in the Wellness Committee. So they're hoping for a little piece of the pie to be able to use should that become available. So
great, thank you. Any other committee reports, Mr. Powell?
Health Cost Containment Committee met. Health Care Cost Containment Committee met on Wednesday, February 3rd. I unfortunately was not able to attend, but at that meeting, the highlight was a presentation of the site of service plan that Mr. Schneider alluded to earlier this evening. And it's my understanding there was great interest around the table. And, just to reiterate, this is going to be if educators take advantage of it, this is going to be a significant savings not only to them but also to the district. And it will be available during open enrollment, not this coming year, but for the year 17, the open enrollment for 17-18, it will be available.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 14, public comments on agenda items. Is there anyone from the public looking to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close public comments, take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn made by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded by Ms. Guagliumi. All those in favor say aye. The motion carries 5-0-0. Mr. Marcus, your opinion?
In favor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Good night.